With 100 star systems, Starfield is going to be truly massive, but just what would it be possible to do within that area? In this video, we're going to check out everything we know about Starfield and space. First though, a couple of tidbits about Starfield related news. One of the biggest questions about the game is of course release date. Well, we don't have that yet, but what we do have is a release date for Bethesda's other big game. This is Redfall, and it's coming out in May. So whilst this doesn't help with the release date for Starfield, what it does tell us is that Starfield will not be releasing in May. By the time you factor in that there's going to be a Starfield conference, which hasn't even happened yet and we don't have a date for that, there's not really a whole big window for a release date this side of May, although some people are expecting April. But many more people are expecting June. Meanwhile, the website Insider Gaming has posted speculation on a potential upcoming Bethesda media conference. There's no mention of Starfield in this, after all Bethesda do have a bunch of other games, but this, if it is to take place, would be happening in March. Extremely vague information here, but one thing we do know is that this event, if it were to happen, would be entirely separate from the upcoming Starfield event. So yeah, with all these events and conferences, it seems Bethesda are very busy at the moment. At any rate, moving on to everything we know about Starfield and space. Although Bethesda have been extremely tight-lipped about this section of the game, it's clear that space is going to be a huge part of Starfield. Another thing that seems to be clear is that the space segments of Starfield and the planetary-based segments are entirely separate from each other with some very strong links. So with that in mind, hopefully they don't feel like two entirely separate games, but feel like one unanimous whole. So when up in space, in your ship, it will be possible to free fly around the entire system. You'll be able to move from planet to planet, as well as, it seems, the space in between. So with space being so big and open, it's going to be essential to fill this area with quality content. This then really does bring the question of size and scope, specifically scale, into focus. It seems very unlikely that Bethesda will go as far as simulating star systems on a 1-to-1 scale. For starters, that would make them mind-bogglingly huge. It would also seem that it's entirely unnecessary for a game like Starfield. After all, this isn't a space simulator, and the focus really should be on gameplay and quality rather than vast open, empty, unused space. But even without a true 1-to-1 scale, it's obvious that star systems are going to be big. And we do know that Bethesda, with their previous games, the Elder Scrolls series and Fallout series, are famed for filling their areas with great content. It's one thing they do really well with their open world games. Talking of which, in space you'll be able to find space stations. We've seen some of these featured in the game reveal footage, and they really do seem to follow the design themes we've seen elsewhere in Starfield, which is a futuristic version of technology and architecture that we have in the present day. It seems to be very much the vibe that Starfield is going for. Now, another thing we've seen in the Starfield footage is ship-to-ship docking. We can see in the little segment right here that the UI shows the ability to undock, get up, and board. Now, get up suggests that players can leave the pilot's seat and walk around their ship whilst in space. But whether or not this will only be an option whilst docked remains to be seen. But hopefully, players will be able to leave their pilot's seat at any time, even if they have to bring the ship to a stop. Now, boarding is an interesting one here. Boarding other ships, it opens up all sorts of possibilities, including perhaps the ability to dock with space stations and board them as well. After all, if the game didn't feature the ability to board space stations, it would feel like a massive wasted opportunity. It seemed to me that space stations could really act as small settlements or villages that can be found in the likes of Skyrim, or perhaps even act as dungeons. Lots of possibilities here, so hopefully it's something that Bethesda make good use of. And after all, it makes sense, right? Space is big, as we said early on, and it needs to be filled with a variety of interesting content. Another thing we've seen in footage here is asteroids. Now, there's a couple of interesting possibilities here. We do know that from the system map that we've seen within the game, ringed planets are a feature. It seems likely that with the ability to free fly, players will be able to fly into these rings, and they would look not too dissimilar to what we're seeing right here, basically loads of asteroids with the planet hanging in the background. You can also see, if you take a closer look here, that there's a whole bunch of debris flying around. Speculation time. It seems two possibilities here. The first is the ability to mine asteroids. After all, we know resource gathering is definitely a thing in Starfield. The second is potentially scavenging, maybe collecting various resources and valuables from the debris that is left out in space. Okay, let's zoom out a bit to the star map. We know there's going to be 100 star systems. Not all of them have been listed, but we do have a few available. It seems that Bethesda here with Starfield are going for a mix, a blend between real-world names and science fiction names. Real-world names are Sol, that's our very own star system, Alpha Centauri, as well as Porrima. Porrima in our world is also known as Gamma Virginis. Meanwhile, Narion, Jaffa, Cheyenne and Volley are all the names that we don't use today for star systems. These are fictional names, but it's possible that these could be real-world locations that have been renamed as humanity is spread out and settled among the stars. Either way, based on what we've seen so far of system maps, Alpha Centauri here, these maps are not using a real-world layout. But personally, I don't see that as a problem. When it comes to games, I always feel that gameplay should trump realism at any step of the way, unless of course you're perhaps working with simulations, which Starfield is not. Now, if star systems are something that's of interest to you, the whole galaxy map out there, the whole thing we have, then do check out this video on the screen right here, where I make some comparisons between the star maps we see in Starfield and their real-world counterparts. Do check it out. That's pretty much everything we know so far then about space and Starfield. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys and girls next time.